Hi, welcome to our introductory R programming course for beginners. You can find a link to the course playlist in the description box. In this video, we're going to learn how to work in RStudio by using R as a calculator to do basic calculations. So right now, we're in RStudio Desktop where we left off in the previous video. I just zoomed in a little bit so you can hopefully see it better even on your phone. But before we begin, I have a tip for those who are working in Posit Cloud. Let's just navigate to that. Posit Cloud here. So if you want more space, you can hide this left navigation bar by clicking this X next to Posit Cloud. And you can get it back by clicking those triple lines here. And you can also hide this header by going to the very right and clicking on this hat that hides the header, and clicking on the inverted hat will show the header again. Now you have more space to work with. Let's go back to RStudio Desktop. We are back in RStudio Desktop and we're going to look at the components of RStudio starting from the top. The first thing we have there is a menu bar with different menu options. Then under that, we have a taskbar with different icons that do different things. And notice that when you hover over the icons, they do tell you what they do. So no need to memorize these at all. And for the one that I'm on right now, it also has Control Alt S in brackets here. That's the keyboard shortcut. So a couple of these will also have the keyboard shortcut for that. And then under that, we have four main panes, and some of them have different tabs in them. One is the source pane, but it's currently hidden. It should be right here where my mouse is. The second one is the console pane here, which is occupying the largest chunk to the left here. And to the right, top right, we've got the environment pane. And then under that, we've got the output pane. We're mostly going to be working in the source pane and the console pane, and we'll start with the one that we can actually see, the console pane. It has two other tabs in it, but you can ignore those. We're not going to use them. Inside the console pane, there are a couple of notes from R. I generally ignore all of them except for the last one that gives us different commands that we can type in to get different things. For example, demos, help, and the last one to quit R. Quitting R just means closing R. And then under that, we've got this greater than sign and this flashing cursor showing us where we can type. The notes are taking up too much space here. We're going to erase them by clicking this broom icon, which will clear the console. Let's do that. There, they're gone. So now we just have this fresh console in. So let's start using R as a calculator. I'll start off by adding a title to this, R as a calculator, just so we all know what we're doing. To do this, I'm going to write what's called a comment. So comments are notes for yourself, your future self, and other people who will use your code. They are completely ignored by the computer during execution. So for notes, the most important thing to write is why you're doing something. Your logic could be different from the next person's, and the way that you solve problems could be different from your future self as well. So writing why you're doing something is very important. The code can tell you what is happening, like what it's doing, but it cannot tell you why it's doing something. So that can help your future self and other people understand your code. You can also write what the code is doing, which I think can be very helpful for beginners, and I really encourage that. However, as you become more of an intermediate, it's not really necessary to write what the code is doing, since reading the code will tell you exactly that. You can also use comments to prevent code from being executed, and we'll see that in a little bit. So let's add our title. So the syntax for comments is a hash sign, or you can call that, I think it's called a pound or a number sign. And then we're going to add our title. So the space that I added here is not necessary, but I like spaces for readability. So let's type R as a calculator. We go. And to send this out for execution in the console, we need to click enter. Because this is a comment, I expect that nothing will happen. So let's do that. Enter. Perfect. Nothing happens. We just get another place to input our statements. So let's start with addition. And I'll just add another comment here to say addition. Click enter. And then let's do 1 plus 1. And when we click enter here, we expect something to happen because this is code and not a comment. So I'm clicking enter. There we go. Underneath our code 1 plus 1, we've got our output and it says 2. That's exactly it. Let's try subtraction. Clicking enter here. 1 minus 1. That should be 0. Move my mouse a little bit here. There we go. We've got 0. So the console is pretty interactive, as we can see here. Results are displayed directly below the code. The console is also temporary, which means it doesn't save anything we write here. This makes it really great for quick calculations or playing around with code to see if it works, but not for more permanent purposes. That's when we need the source panel. To unhide it, we click on this double window icon. There we go. Now we have the source panel at the top left and the console now in the bottom left. In the source pane, we have an R script already made available to us. You can write your code in this section here, and you can save the script here by clicking this disk icon. I'll go ahead and clear the console so that we can see what will happen when we run code from this script. So clear the console, again, that broom icon. Okay, now the console is clear. I'm going to go up here and paste in what we had before. So we've got our comments and the commands or the calculations that we had written. So let's run these. To run these, you can either run them line by line by clicking on the line that you want to run and then hitting run here, or you can highlight everything and then hit run to run everything. So we're going to do that. Let's click run and look down here in the console. Well, pretty much looks like the way that it did before. This is because the code from the script is taken into the console and then that's where it's executed. So this is not ideal because we want the same interactiveness that the console has, but we also want to be able to save it. That's when you need a different type of file called a notebook. So let's go up here to this page with the plus sign icon. We'll see different file options. We've got the R script at the top, and then we've got the R notebook that we're looking for. So let's click on that to see it pop up. It's going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to give us an error message. We'll just wait for it. Great. So it's telling us that we are missing some packages. Just click yes, and we'll wait for the packages to install. It's going to show some stuff here. Those are the background jobs. So things like this, like installing packages, is going to be shown in the background jobs. It's done installing the packages now, and it's brought us back to the console, and we have our notebook in the source pane. So I'm going to clear the console as before so we can see what's going to happen. And this console is taking up a lot of space actually. So we're going to move it by going between the source pane and the console pane and dragging that down a little bit. You can do this with all the other panes as well for when you want to see more of one pane and just a little bit of another. Now let's go to our new notebook. We have quite a few things in our notebook already. You will get these every time you create a new notebook. I always delete them and start on a clean slate, but I will use them today to explain what a notebook is. So we already know two things. We know that we can save notebooks, and we know that they are interactive, i.e., results will appear below the code that you write. What we don't know is, besides comments, notebooks provide another way to write notes with format options. So basically, we have three types of sections in here. At the top, we've got the header section, and then we've got a text section for our notes, and then we've got the code chunks here. So let's start from the top. For the header section, we've got a title And I'm going to change that from R notebook and paste in R as a calculator from before. And the second line, it's a line that tells the computer to output an HTML notebook or an HTML file. An HTML document is a web page, so it's really useful for bloggers or anyone wanting to add their work as a project to a website. So I'm going to keep it there because I might want to turn this into a page on our website. Under that, we've got the text section. So you can write either in plain text or in Markdown. Markdown is a type of computer language called markup language that uses symbols to tell a computer how to format text. So as an example in here, it says this is an R Markdown. R Markdown is in box brackets. And then in parentheses next to it, we've got a link. So this is the syntax, the Markdown syntax for writing a link. And once it's in HTML, it will look like a normal link. Other syntax here is for run. Those asterisks means it's going to be bold, and the same here with Control Shift Enter. So let's preview it so we can see what it looks like. To do so, we move up to our toolbar here and click that preview button, but we can only preview it once we've saved our notebook. And you can click there and it'll prompt you to save it, but I'm gonna click on the Save Current Document, so we click on a few more things in there. Let's click that. And I'll save it here. It's showing me where it's saving. That's the OneDrive folder. It's great. I'm going to call it DSP lesson 1 and save. Now our file is saved. It's DSP lesson 1. So what we do is click preview now so we can see what this looks like in HTML. Right, the window pops up. So you see R as a calculator as our title. Now it's formatted. It's like big and bold. And R Markdown, here it's now a link. It's not the same format that we had there. It's like a normal format. And run is, oh, italics, not bold. Oops, my bad. Bold is double asterisks. There we go. So let this be a reminder to you that you don't have to memorize any of this. You can always check references. I don't know all the Markdown by head. And honestly, our main concern here is going to be the code. I do want to mention briefly, however, that with Markdown, you can add much more than just links and italics or bold. You can have multiple headers with different sizes, and you can have bullet points, tables, images, or even equations. So there's a lot that you can do with Markdown. But let's get back to the coding. So let's get out of here and let's go start writing some of our calculations in here. I'll delete everything else like I usually do. You can honestly go and read that. It's very good information, but I'm just going to highlight it and delete so we can start afresh here, or deleting everything except the header. So let's add a code chunk. What we're going to do is to go up here to this C with the plus here, click the drop down, and we're going to click on R. Notice that you can run other programming languages in here too, like Python, but we'll click on R. There we've got an R chunk. It's a little too close to our header here, so I'm just gonna give it some more space. Here we go. Now let's try addition. So I'll still add a comment in and write addition, and we're gonna have the same thing, 1 plus 1. To run this code chunk, you can click here inside the code chunk, this run the current chunk, that play button kind of thing. Let's click that, and then you see the answer displayed underneath, which is what we wanted. Yay! You notice that it still is sent to the console, and it's also executed in there, and you can see the answer, but we can also see it in here. So we can basically ignore the console here, except there's one other thing that I want to show you. So let's add another R chunk. I'm actually going to do it differently. So I'm going to highlight here from the very last symbol here to the very first one. And then I'm going to right click and copy, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control C. We're going to go down to line 11 here and then just paste it, which I'll do right click and paste, or you can use Control V. So that's a way that you can copy different chunks without having to put the chunk in and then rewrite. So let's turn the plus to a minus, and I will change this to I will change this to subtraction. Let's run that as well, and we'll see it under here too. So I encourage you to try this out with all the other like arithmetic operations. If I go through them all, it might take some time. And if we go to the file section here, to the bottom right in the output pane, I've saved an image in here with the different arithmetic operators for R. So you can see them right here, but you won't be able to see it on your computer. These are just on my computer. But you'll be able to see the notebook that we just saved and also the HTML file that it produced. This file tab here is like File Explorer on your computer if you have Windows or whatever file management system that you have. It shows the files in the directory where R is saving everything. And if you want to know what this directory is, you can go to the very right here. There's these triple dots, and if you click on it, it should open what directory that is, and you can see it from there. So for me, it's OneDrive. I'll cancel that. And you can go save stuff in there and you'll see it here. But you can also add folders in here in this file tab. You can add a blank file, you can delete files, and you can rename as well. So I'm going to open up this R arithmetic operators so we can see what the operators are. Here we go. So you can just pause this and try to work through all of those. We've already seen addition, the plus sign, subtraction, minus sign. We've got division, it's got a forward slash, multiplication, asterisk, exponentiation, or power. That's going to be the little hat. I don't actually know if it's called a little hat sign, but I'll keep calling it that. Then modulus or remainder operator, that's two percentage signs. And then integer division, or some people call it floor division, it's percentage, forward slash, and then percentage. So you can try those out, but I'll get out of here and we'll get back to our coding. So I want to talk next about syntax errors. So we've talked about syntax errors in our What is Programming video. We say that you can get a syntax error when you write code that goes against the rules of the programming language's format. So let's see that in action. I believe we used the example of 1 plus in our video, and we'll use that here as well. So what I'm going to do first is just going to click enter a bunch so we can have a couple more lines in here. And I'm going to add a header of that says syntax. And I'm going to do this in Markdown. So everywhere that you don't have code or code chunk, it's going to be the text section, the Markdown section. So to add a small header, we'll do to hash, and then I'll write syntax. Right, I'll just click enter and add another code chunk, an R chunk, and we'll put 1 plus only. So let's run that and see what that does. All right, so it gives us an error. It says it's an incomplete expression. So R doesn't actually say the word syntax error, but it tries very hard to tell you like what is going on. It's saying you this expression is incomplete, which is true. We just need to add another number in it. So there are other errors that you will get that will give you an error message. We may not see them, well, we may not see all of them in this course, but you can just copy them and Google to see what they are, and that may give you an idea on how to correct them. And if you're comfortable with using AI like ChatGPT, Bing, or Bard, you can always give them your code and ask them what's wrong with it so that you can learn, and you can also ask them to fix the code. But I do want to show something, the reason why we still have the console in. So the console acts a little differently than our notebook, which is going to be a point to our notebook. Let's say we type 1 plus inside the console down here, bottom left, and click enter. Yeah, so we don't get an error message, but it has this plus there. It doesn't tell you, oh, something's wrong. It just goes, you're forgetting something. Go put it in. So even if you keep clicking enter, it will keep putting that plus until you put something in. So when I put another 1 here, that's when it's going to be like, okay, great, thank you. That's a 2. Yeah, another point to the notebooks here. Let's just see another example of an error, of a syntax error. Let's add a code chunk, and I'm going to just write 1 and then 1 again. I'll scroll down here so we can see and run that. And it says incomplete numeric constant in 1 1. So we're missing that operator there. That's another syntax error that you could get. Let's hide the console because we don't need it anymore. We can just see everything that's run up in our notebook. So to hide the console, we'll click here. There's this big pane icon here. We'll click the little pane icon and it'll hide it, kind of like it was in the beginning where the source panel was hid, but the console wasn't hid. But we're probably going to keep the console hidden for most of our course here because all we need is this notebook here. There is an error that we talked about that doesn't give you an error message. That's semantic error. You get a semantic error when you give the computer the wrong instructions to complete a task. And at this point, you can get a semantic error from forgetting about the order of operations when it comes to calculations. So let's put a header in here. We'll do the same size as the syntax error, and we'll write semantic error. Let's go. Then I'll write order of operations as a smaller heading than that. Order of operations. There you go. I feel like I didn't explain this, but a hash in the code section is a comment, but a hash in the text section is going to be a header. And the syntax for that is a hash or multiple hash, a space, and then the text that you want. So the more the hash signs, the smaller the heading is going to be, up to about 6 of them. That's when it's like you don't need this many headers. It just turns into text with a lot of number signs, basically. So now that we've got that out of the way, for order of operations, I'll write some notes here. I learned this. It's board mass. I believe some people learned BOMDAS, some people PEMDAS, or something along those lines. But basically, let me scroll up a little bit here. Yep. So basically, it means that brackets have the highest order of operations, and then we have orders, which are exponents or powers, and then division and multiplication have the same order of operations. So when you have division and multiplication, you can just go from the left to the right. And then addition and subtraction also have the same order of operations, but they are the last priority. And you can also go from left to right when you only have addition and subtraction. Otherwise, the other ones trump it. So let's look at an example here. Let's add a R chunk. And I'm going to put 1 plus 1 times 2. So if we're going from the left to the right, I guess, which is the natural way to work through math, it would be 1 plus 1, which is 2, and then 2 times 2, which is 4. But that's not what we're going to get. So let's run that. Okay, we get a 3. That's because multiplication has a higher priority than addition. So it actually starts with the 1 times 2, which is 2, and then adds the 1, which would give us the 3. So this would be a semantic error. If you were expecting that this is going to give you a 4 and it doesn't, and you don't notice, and it's part of like a lot of code, then you've got a semantic error. So it's always good to check your code to see if for every section, is this what you were expecting to get? And if you notice something like this and you were expecting a 4, then one course of action would be, for example, to go add brackets around the 1 plus 1, because brackets reign supreme. And once you add them, it will be a 4 because it's going to start with 1 plus 1 and then multiply by 2. We can run that again, and that's a 4. So that's R as a calculator. And honestly, we mostly covered RStudio here because there was a lot to cover. And notice that I didn't cover everything, especially some sections will only really populate or apply later on. For example, the environment section, we'll see it actually populate in the next video, and I will tell you about that then, and other things that will be relevant then. For now, there are a couple of things that I just want to finish up with on this notebook. First of all, let's save it. It's always good to save it. And now let's navigate to the drop down next to the run button. Just click on that. It's going to give us more options for running the cell. So we can run all chunks above, run all chunks below, run all, and we can also restart R and run all chunks. It doesn't really matter here for us restarting R and running all chunks, because all we're doing is like giving R a calculation and then it's returning the answer to us. But when we start saving things, like in the next video where we'll learn about variables, which are a way to save things in R, then that's when it's going to matter, because when you restart R, you're going to clear all the memory and it starts over, and you would have lost all those variables that you've saved. So that's why it's generally like here, restart and run all. You can also restart R and clear the output, and then you can get to rerun everything by yourself too. Let's get out of there. And then the last thing, one thing I am very excited about, I just learned about this recently, even though it was introduced in 2021. So there's a more user-friendly way of writing in notebooks. So right now we're in the source here, which is pretty much like raw format. You see the syntax for like a header or things. And there's a visual one, which looks kind of like the HTML preview that we looked at, and you can edit it unlike that HTML. So let's click on it and take a look. Probably give us that switch to visual mode. It's telling you some stuff. You can read that, but I would say don't show this message again. And you can switch between the two as well. So let's click use visual mode. Now this is what it looks like. So our semantic error headers are now looking like headers, order of operations, everything. And the code, the R chunk, looks a lot different. So we only retained that R, but it looks more like a nice UI here, which is really great. And for Markdown, you can add bold, you can add tables, just like you would like in Microsoft Word. It's pretty awesome. And you can always go back and forth between the source and the visual editor. One thing I want to show you of how you can copy our chunks, you can just highlight them all here. I'll say right click, copy. I'm so used to Control C, so I want to put Control C, and paste, which would be Control V. And now you have an R chunk as well, but you can still add it the same way that you would normally here, and R, and then you have a chunk. And if you go back to the source, you will see, let's scroll down there, you will see that chunk again here, or these two chunks that we just pasted too. So it's pretty awesome, that visual editor. And maybe I'll start using it from now on, but I'm so used to the source that we will see. We will see in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This was a really long video, but there is a lot to cover with RStudio. Next, we're going to, as I already mentioned, look at variables, which are a way to store things in R. And that's when our real programming journey really begins. So excited, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye.